Greetings, everyone. Welcome to Artcasters number 148, and we're here tonight with Peter Simeti of Alterna Comics, and we'll get to him in just a minute. But as usual, we'll just kind of make the rounds real quick. You probably know who I am. I'm Scott with Circworks. You're on my channel, so I'm guessing you know who I am. You can also follow me at circworks.com. Actually, right now, my website is down. I had some bit of malware, so I just rerouted everything to my store, Indie Store. But I'm working on a brand new website, so I figured why pay to have all that junk removed when I can just switch over to a new one. So if you go there, it's just my online store right now. And the other thing, if you're trying to get a hold of me, my email, when I did that, I guess my email's not working properly. So just if anyone did email me, I didn't get it. So I'll have to figure out how I can check in on that. But that's what's going on with me. Let me kick it back over to Josh. Hey, Josh.
Hey, how's it going? So you can check out my art at quarterlystories.com, where I'm serializing a graphic novel about faith and mental illness. And then you can also find me on the YouTubes by looking for Joshua Kemble with a K. And then occasionally, every other week, I'm on Scott's channel, which you should subscribe to right now. All right.
All right. And like I said, tonight we have Peter Simeti, which we've been trying to get on the show for a little bit. And we appreciate you coming on, Peter. And so I'm a big fan of Alterna Comics. And so I've got tons of questions, probably more than we can get to in a half hour. Or an hour and a half, I mean, but we'll see what we can. But I know you've got something, definitely you want to promote something that just started tonight that I kind of backed. So what's going on, Peter?
Yeah, I just want to say thanks for having me on the show. It's been a long time in the making. I know we had to push things back like twice, and oh man,
it's understandable.
so much has happened since we initially spoke about trying to get this together, and I'm glad that I'm on here, and it worked out nice because tonight we've got Alterna Ween, which is a nice Indiegogo campaign to get our comics out as trick-or-treats, and the funding is going to go towards helping us to expand our distribution. So it's kind of a cool thing, and it's a nice thing to see that so many people are wanting to support this sort of campaign, because it's really cool that comics are going to be used as trick-or-treats for kids that maybe this will be their first comic, and all these people, there's gonna be thousands. So far we've got, I think, like 25% of the goal raised or something like that. There's going to be thousands of comics out there. That means thousands of kids that potentially are going to become new readers and possibly even new creators of comics. So it's kind of cool to see.
And that's what I really like about what you're doing with Alterna, is you really are trying to get comics out to people, and you've just got some amazing ideas, and just the way you run your business and everything. We'll get into that. But I mean, when I first heard about you guys, which was probably earlier on in this year, I mean, I just basically tried to get my hands on everything I had. Finally, I got all the newsprint stuff. So I'm up to date. And I finally was a little tricky to get my comic book store to start carrying everything and getting everything, but it seems like it's going smooth for the past couple weeks. So, but yeah, I mean, I'm just really impressed with everything you're doing. And just the whole idea, I mean, you've just got a lot of these brilliant ideas, the whole idea of getting comics out there for Halloween and everything. And I backed it, but I think I might have to up my pledge, because we usually do like a huge Halloween haunt, and like 50 comics is not going to cut it. So I don't know. I just don't know, because I mean, sometimes we'll have like hundreds and hundreds of people. So,
oh, wow.
So I don't know. Maybe we got to like only the best costumes get them or something. I don't know. We'll have to figure that out.
Yeah, we've got the 100 and the 200. I know on there that you could get, but I think the most bang for your buck is at the 200 level.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's great to see, and so many people were really psyched about this. I mean, every time you come up with an idea like this, especially, it's always a risk, and you never quite know if it's going to land. And including just the newsprint itself was a big risk, and that was more like a passion project for me. So I'm glad to see that it's really kind of correlated with a lot of people's feelings about comics and missing newsprint and all that kind of stuff. So it's worked out great for us.
Yeah, it's weird that you say that it was sort of a risk for you, because I just thought, well, I kind of thought, well, you had this, because everything you're talking about just makes perfect sense to me. So I thought the newsprint was just part of that. But I guess, yeah, it is kind of risky, because who prints on newsprint other than you? I mean, I think more people will now that you've kind of taken that lead. But I'm really impressed with your whole business model, because creator owned. I like the way everything you're doing is mini series. You got this diverse lineup of different genres. Everything, it's on newsprint, the prices are low, you're trying to get it on newsstands. This is the whole thing. I mean, I just really think this is what comics needs, and I'm hoping other people will kind of follow your lead. And just hearing you, I don't think you're going to mind so much if people do that. I don't think it's like, well, we're Alterna, we're the guys that are doing newsprint. I mean, because, we'll get into like printer partnership and all that kind of stuff, but I'm sorry, I'm just throwing so many things at you. But
yeah, no, I mean, there's nothing proprietary about what we're doing. Right. I know so many people are saying, oh, it's such a great idea you came up with. And the truth be told, I didn't come up with this idea at all. This was being done in comics for like 6 to 7 decades. This was comic books. And the fact that the industry got away so much from not only newsprint, but getting comics in a ton of places and newsstands and this and that and whatever. We're seeing the effects of that. We're seeing the effects of what the industry looks like when comics are in fewer and fewer places and the prices keep going through the roof because of that, because they're not supported with sales by volume. So you need to capitalize on as many sales as you can with as high of a price as you can get it. I mean, we see comics now, they're starting to become like $8 to $10 for an issue, even if it's, 70 pages. I don't care. It's not something that's sustainable. Especially on a number one. Number ones used to be loss leaders. It used to be really get people on board a series. And then, maybe number two's a little higher. Now you see number ones, everyone's capitalizing on the fact that the number ones are going to get ordered big. That's where they count on their money. And then it turns into 6 or 7 issues later, a series is canceled or all of a sudden proclaimed as a miniseries. And then readers get frustrated. So all this frustration, all this kind of the tension mounting within the industry. It's kind of funny to see so many people complain about, there's no way that comics can be cheaper. There's no way you can print them on newsprint. There's no way you can put them back on newsstands. And we're literally doing all of that. So it's funny to see so much turmoil in an industry that's refusing to understand. Let's go back to the way it was when it was really successful, and not necessarily story-wise, but business-wise.
Yeah, I mean, it worked before, and it stands to reason. I don't see any reason why it couldn't work again. I mean, I may have had my doubts in the beginning when digital first started to go in vogue, but that's not really the case. I mean, I don't really think digital has much of an impact on sales of like physical books. No, not as much as I thought it would.
No, digital's probably about 10% of our sales.
Yeah,
and that's usually what it's about for every single publisher. Digital's not going to take over the way people think it will. It got a little bit, it gained some traction when it first came out. It was the new thing, and everyone was getting digital comics and reading them and whatever. But then I think it just plateaued a bit, and even ebook sales plateaued, and they've kind of stayed around that margin as well. So I don't see it happening, not at the way that it's happening. I think if they could turn it into a advertiser-based system so that it's almost like the way radio works, where it's free for people to use, it's just advertising is what's sponsoring and supporting and getting all the payouts. Maybe digital would do 20-30% of the market share. But this kind of stuff, especially when you talk about Comixology, if Amazon decides to shut down Comixology completely, you don't own any of those files. So you just paid into that license to have all those comics, and then they're boom, gone. You can purchase all the comics you want physically. There's no one, Marvel shuts down tomorrow. You still own all those comics. Alterna shuts down tomorrow. You still own all our books. So it's nothing as substantial with digital the way people want to think it is. And it's exciting. It's cool. It's that kind of, it frees up your space and whatever in your house. But I think people are slowly starting to realize that it's not necessarily the wave of the future that they thought it would be.
Right.
Yeah.
So, go ahead. Sorry, Josh.
Sorry, I just wanted to tack onto the thing you were mentioning about the Halloween kind of giveaway and that kind of thing as like a marketing potential too, because of the fact that like myself, like how I even got turned on to comic books was like the reverse of the kind of typical story where, generally it's like, oh, comics will get kids into reading. And I was really into reading books. And I ended up finding a free comic book at a library. that was like a giveaway, like, hey, kids, get into reading. And it worked the reverse, where it was like, you know, that introduced me to Spider-Man. So the comic was called like Spider-Man Adventures in Reading. And from there, I went to like a local, you know, mini mart to get a comic from a rack and stuff. So it's like, to me, I think you're right about when comics are on the spinner rack. Hey, man. When comics are on the spinner rack, or like being given away, like as loss leaders, to kind of, you know, with the understanding that like once you buy in, you're going to get that payoff of the story, you're going to get bought in, and you're going to become a lifelong reader. I think that's a huge thing, and that's cool that you're kind of kickstarting that, like a Halloween thing. Because I think thinking outside of the box like that is going to be the type of thing that draws people who aren't exposed to comics into comics. You know, I don't
Absolutely.
know.
Yep. No, absolutely. You're 100% right. And we've noticed that too. Our readership has gone up about, I'd say, 300% at this point from last year. And last year, our readership went up 250%. Our sales have gone up at this point. It's something like 1,800% from last year. And last year was up 700% from the year before. We didn't. For those that don't know Alterna, you're not familiar with it. We've been around for about 12 years. 2006 was when we came out, and 2008 was when we started getting distribution. And it's kind of funny to see so many people discover us for the first time because of these single issues. We'd mostly just did graphic novels for such a long time, and because of the issues and the lower price point, we noticed a lot more people willing to give our books a shot. And because of that, the books are good. They like them. They go, I can read a whole series. I can read a whole 4-issue series for the cost of like 1 issue at most other publishers. And because of that, all these creators are starting to get more awareness for their work. They can get more jobs. They can merchandise some of their creations, which as a creator-owned person, that's the whole point of this, right? You want to utilize as much of your product, as much of your IP as possible. Otherwise, what's the point of being creator-owned? So it puts you in a position to better leverage an audience. The comics, it's part of that whole, loss leader mentality. But we're talking about graphic novels, digital comics, potential merchandise, which all those people, all the creators, they keep 100% of that. So it's kind of funny to see, if we're going to move towards a creator-owned mentality within comics, we have to understand that we need a larger audience base. Otherwise, what's the whole point of this? We're just going to be making comics and kind of be like hamsters in a circle, just spinning the wheel, and we're not getting anywhere. So I love the fact that we've expanded such a large audience because of the price point, and the newsprint has allowed us to do that.
Yeah, what I really like about what you're doing is, in addition to the newsprint, you're also collecting the volumes in graphic novels, and those are on premium stock. So say for whatever reason, maybe you're not a huge fan of newsprint, you still have that option. And the cool thing is people aren't trade waiting, because it's going to cost you the same amount or less for the newsprint. So you could read all your newsprint and then oh, I really like this. I'd like to see how this art looks like in a premium format. And then go ahead and get that. Like, I'm a big fan of the 12. That's probably one of my favorite titles that you put out. And one of the things, not to stroke your ego too much, but I love the colors. I love that monotone color palette, and I know you're the colors on that. But I would like to see kind of what that looks like in a premium format. So and for that you do the Kickstarters, and like you said, that's the creators are so if they can sell all the individual issues plus the trade. Because if I collect all the individual issues of a Marvel comic, I'm not going to buy the trade, because it's the same thing, So I really like that approach.
Yeah, and I think as an industry, we're seeing a lot of that trade waiting, which is really impacting reader mentality when it comes to the fact that these single issues, the sale of them is what enables most publishers to have a trade. It gauges, your entire forecast for how you're going to plan the schedule out, and if this trade gets priced at a certain point, what gets included, where it gets distributed. But if we have this whole thing where we're training readers, we're training retailers to trade wait, essentially, it's going to kill the fact that the trade's going to get made. It might not kill it at like a Marvel or a DC or potentially an Image, but it will at our level. If we're expecting readers that, they get an issue 1 and they say, well, I'm just going to wait for the trade. The trade's not going to come then, because there's not going to be any interest for it. We're going to be able to say, well, no one really liked it, so we're not going to put a trade out. It's not worth the investment and everything else. But it's important for us to get back into that cycle of single issues are important. And there's so many things right now in the industry that feels like they're counterintuitive to what made the industry flourish to begin with.
Right. Yeah. So, I mean, and I'm really curious for the people that do kind of doubt the whole newsprint thing. It might be kind of an interesting experiment to have the same book published on newsprint for $1.50 right next to a premium format for $5 and see what sells more. I mean, that would be your proof right there. It would just be interesting to see that, because
as a publishers and everything too, we got the whole single issue lines on newsprint. Publishers don't need to necessarily switch over entirely to newsprint. They could test it out. They could see, maybe there's just some type of books that'll look better on newsprint, or, they have kind of like a retro vibe to them. And then they could put those out and see how they do with a lower price point. But the idea that, some of these people have said, and it's very few, but they're like, the industry can't survive on these, $1.50 comics. So, if you have all of a sudden the entire industry switching over to $1.50, $2 comics or whatever, these shops are going to all go under quicker than before and all this other nonsense. And the funny part is that if it works for us, right? Imagine if like Marvel or DC or Image had $1.50, $2. Any book that looks somewhat interesting or has a story that's taking kind of too long to tell, you're going to stick out with it a little more, because you're like, this, I'm not getting killed at $5 a pop here. It's $1.50, $2. I can stick out, 3-4 issues and give this a chance. But if it doesn't impress you right off the bat and it costs you like $5, I mean, for me personally, I can't justify having our readers pay that, because I wouldn't pay that. I don't pay that. So I don't want to force our readership to go, hey, you know what, it's $4.99. It's a great book, but you're going to have to pay that. And if I never want someone buying our stuff and going, wow, I didn't really, get as great of a value as I thought I would. Whereas $1.50, or it came out on a Wednesday, which is $1.99 for a double-sized book, you're going to be hard pressed to find someone that goes, oh, well, you know what, that really wasn't worth it. They're going to go every single time. They're going to go, that was great. That was a great value for what it was. I might not have paid $4 or $5 for that, but for $1.50, that was incredible.
Yeah, and like you said before, it's volume is what you're looking for, because I buy everything you put out, and I'm not, and like you said, I don't worry about it, because I know if it's a story I don't really care as much for, I wasted $1.50, big deal. And even the stories that might not be to my cup of tea that you might put out, I still continue the run, just because I want to support you, because you're doing awesome stuff, and because I just love this idea. But if I'm buying everything, there's other people that are doing that too, and there's no way I could afford to buy everything Marvel does. I can't,
exactly. Maybe
a couple titles, but I mean, if Marvel Comics and DC Comics could just put out a newsprint line, because that's not so unusual. I mean, there was a time when comic stores first kind of came into popularity and everything, where, you had that deluxe format and you also had the newsprint stuff on the newsstand and everything like that. So there was a time where you had both. I don't see why they couldn't. And I mean, to be honest, Marvel could probably set a $1.50 price range and even print on like a premium stock if they wanted to, probably.
Well, all they got to do is sell some advertising, right?
Yeah,
if we
exactly.
can sell advertising and cut our print cost in half, which ends up making the books even cheaper than they are already. There's no reason on earth, if I'm Marvel Comics and I have an advertising division, we could print these on advertising alone and not lose a dime, because advertising would completely subsidize the cost of the print runs and the creative teams on books, as long as they did it right. But there's so many books, there's too many books. There's, as a publisher, I never want to put out so many books at such a price where someone could not enjoy and get all of them. So if I'm Marvel and I'm putting out a mega ton of books and I'm flooding the market essentially, I'm looking at that and I'm going, can a reader time-wise and money-wise, can they actually enjoy everything we put out? And there was a time when that was possible with Marvel and DC. That time is, I don't know anyone that's reading everything and is able to enjoy everything, even if they wanted to. There's so many books that cost so much money. I think there's upwards of almost 1,000 comics released a month between all the comics that are out there. So we got more comics than ever before, less places to sell them at than ever before. And everyone's wondering, well, what's going on? Why are things not working? There's such obvious answers to how to correct things, and no one wants to take a chance on actually doing any of it. We all just want to sit around and play the blame game, and we're seeing where that's leading us as an industry. And I don't want to do that. I've said it before on my own show, I don't like harping on the things I don't necessarily like. I like to boost the things I do like. So I want to try to find solutions to problems. If I can't think of a solution to a problem, I'm not really going to address it until I can kind of come up with something. It might not work, but it's something that I'm trying out anything to be a little more proactive on the situation as opposed to being so passive and then reactive.
Yeah, and like you said, because it's always, nobody wants to try anything new until they see somebody else do it. And I think the fact that you're doing this, once people start to take notice, I really think this can start a ripple and that can create a big wave that can really change the industry. I really believe in that. Because you see it with Hollywood all the time. You see the same stuff over and over again until somebody does something different, then they all want to jump on that. So as long as there's one person, it only takes one person. So if you're doing this, people start to take notice and they look, more people, once people see it's successful, they can jump on it. I think it can really, really change the business, and that's kind of what I'm hoping for.
Yeah, I hope so. I mean, that's why you mentioned earlier the printing partnership program. I wanted to launch that a couple of weeks ago. We had, for those that don't know, we had massive amounts of insanity that have occurred in the past 3 weeks regarding Alterna and all the other stuff that's happening. And I don't want to go too much into it because it's been just
Right.
nothing short of a nightmare in some respects. But so the printing partnership program, I came up with that because of the fact that I'd be doing shows and I'd be seeing a lot of people struggling at Artist Alley. And we'd have a great show, and I'd be completely unaware until I walked around that other people were not really having a great show. And the common denominator was always, it's hard selling these books at $5, $6 a piece, but I can't sell them for less because print on demand is so much money.
Right.
I'm not really making anything. And I still can't sell these books to people, so, and a creator could be really good, but they're unknown, and you got so much money at a convention. So you're going to go for stuff that you can afford, stuff that you know of, if you're going to spend a little bit more on it. So they'd all be having a hard time. We'd be selling hundreds of comics, and then I'd talk to a creator and they're maybe selling 10 or 15. And I'm just like, oh my Lord, like I've been there before. I know how hard it is with Artist Alley, especially how discouraging things can get. And eventually I thought, you know what? Maybe we can get something going where we can have guys piggyback onto our print runs and get a lower cost. Because if you go into newsprint, and if anyone doesn't realize, newsprint's printed on a web press as opposed to most comics that are printed on an offset press. It's a whole different system. An offset press will destroy newsprint. So you need a different press system, and you usually print a little bit of a higher quantity. Now, if you go into newsprint and you print like 1,000 or something, it's not really going to be cost effective. But if you print 5,000, 6,000, something like that, it's going to be pretty cheap pretty quick. We print upwards of almost 20 to 30,000 comics in total when we put all of our print runs together. So our print cost is pretty low. Now, if we put another book on there, let's say if we were to do, your book or something, and you wanted to do 500 even, now you get to pretty much piggyback onto our print costs. You only get like a different setup charge for the fact that they have to stop the press, switch the plates, and all that stuff. So we're talking about upwards of, 50 cents. I know how high that is. 50 cents per comic on a 500 run. That completely changes the dynamic of what these creators can charge their books at. And if you talk about a creator who's unknown in Artist Alley and you sell your book for $2 a piece and you're making like $1 and change on a book, that's far better than, you print these things out. They're $4 a piece, let's say, after shipping and everything else, and now you sell it for $5, and maybe you sell some, but at $2 a piece, you're probably going to sell a whole lot more, and you're going to get your work out there. And that's the whole point of it, right? Is to get these people reading your stuff. And the fact that there's so many people in Artist Alley that are struggling with that, and really talented, hardworking people too. It broke my heart every single time I'd go to a show and see that. And hopefully this printing partnership thing can really help some people out, and they take advantage of that, and they can succeed with it.
Yeah, I'm excited about it. I wish it would have happened a lot sooner. Not like, I mean, I wish you would have started Newsprint years ago and all this stuff, because if I would have known when I was starting off my comic, it seems like now I've kind of established a look. And of course, like you said, I'm selling comics for $5, and I'm, but I sell a lot of shows, and I think if I was just only selling comics, I'd sell more comics. But yeah, I mean, it's just, in my book, I think my book is very retro, so I think it would have looked great on newsprint and if I would have done full color. But so now I'm kind of like wondering, well, I wonder if I did like a color version, because I could do a color version on newsprint and charge less than a black and white version that I'm selling now in like a print on demand. It's just, so yeah, it's like, yeah, if I, I definitely, my next project, if I ever finish the one I'm working on, I would definitely want to try go the newsprint route and everything, I think. But yeah, I think it's really cool that, and that's the thing that I like about what you're doing is, again, it's not, I mean, like just the slogan, comics for everyone. I mean, you want everyone to be reading comics and everything, and you're trying to get this, and you're doing all these different things to get the comic books out there, and you're offering other people those same avenues so they can get their comics out there as well. And I just think it's really admirable.
Yeah, I mean, I wish that we could almost sublease our distribution without it seeming like some kind of weird scheme. Right. So this way we can get more books out there. But it's something that I'm never someone that's going to, hold down lock and key information on printing, on distribution, on all that kind of stuff, because I want more comics out there. I want people to succeed. I want people to have these avenues available to them. Anyone ever asks me, what printer we use, I'll just say right now we use Eagle Web Press in Salem, Oregon for our newsprint, and we use API, which is in I believe in Tennessee or Georgia for our trades, and they've got amazing prices, both printers. So it's something too, when I see a lot of pros hold on to that information, I want the printers to get more business. I mean, these printers have taken on almost a dozen more clients because we're very public with when, someone asks, hey, who do you use? And we just tell them. So I want to see everybody succeed. I want to see our printers in business more, because that means they order also more paper, which means that we all succeed a little bit because we get lower print costs. So it's that kind of thing where there's so much like this weird secrecy, kind of like an odd gatekeeping within these kind of industries. All creative fields, they're very, got to hold on to like the secret recipe of success. Like someone won't figure it out. It's very odd.
Yeah, I think that's changing. I know I've done a number of videos just telling people, this idea of trade secrets in art is just ridiculous, because I tell anyone, if you want to know anything, just like you said, if you want to know who I use for printers, techniques, anything like that, I'm more than willing to share, because everyone's going to do artwork differently. I could show videos and show you exactly how I do everything, exactly the way I do it, but people aren't going to do it exactly my way. It's going to be different. So I don't really have to worry about that. It's just, but yeah. And in your case, as a publisher, I mean, it's all for the betterment of the industry. So, but
exactly, I always view, everyone's success helps everybody out. If we can get more successful comics out there, that means more retailers are selling comics, which means they have more funds to purchase more comics, to give those comics they might have viewed as a risk. They can now go, I'll put them in the store because I'm doing pretty good, and I'll give these a shot. Yeah. It's always kind of strange to me when I see indie creators that go, well, I don't really care if Marvel and DC do well because their business doesn't affect my business. If you're getting your comics at all into a store, it absolutely does affect your business because that retailer, the 80% of what they're going to sell is going to be Marvel and DC. Let's just get realistic. If those guys closed shop tomorrow, Marvel and DC will still be fine. They'll still be making billions of dollars on their IP. They probably sell more wrapping paper of Batman and Spider-Man than comic books. And they'll be fine. But the direct market, the comic shops, forget about it. They'll be decimated. And what does that spell for your comic, your indie comic that's going to be on the shelf, that was going to be on the shelf that no longer is there? So, it's you can't really control, obviously, how those businesses thrive and what decisions they make. But it's always good to be mindful of what's going on within the industry and notice certain trends. I noticed the trends of the prices going through the roof, people complaining about certain things, people complaining about certain ways that stories are getting produced and made and this and that, and losing a bit of that escapism from comics. And at Alterna, we always have published escapist level material. It's just stuff that I gravitate towards. I don't want to read a comic that doesn't transport me to another world. I think most people feel the same way. If I want to watch the news, I'm going to turn on the news. I don't want to open up a comic and read the news necessarily. You're going to see relevant themes, of course, and I mean, that's what makes comics great. But you shouldn't be bombarded with it necessarily. So at Alterna, we do a lot of escapist books, a lot of fun comics, even if they're, the XII, the 12 is very heavy in terms of the themes, but it's still fun because it takes you into that world. It's not beating you over the head with some other point it's trying to make. It's just, here's this world, here's these characters, here's their struggle, read about it and get lost in it. And that's part of the fun of comics and stories in general.
Yeah, and I do like the XII 12. I know I say XI so people can find it, but I really do like the fun books. That's like Zero Jumper is another one. I love Zero Jumper. But yeah, I mean, but the thing is, I just have a diverse taste in comics, and I like the fact that you don't just publish superhero stuff. You publish all kinds of different stuff, and it's great. And just going back to kind of when we were talking about Marvel and DC, I was really happy to see that DC now has books in like Walmart, and it is like, it's a big thick book for about $5 as opposed to a single issue for $5. So I think that's a step in the right direction. I hope Marvel follows suit. But yeah, I mean, and I can't say where that's probably, I don't know if you're on their radar or not, but as long as people are trying different things, I like the fact that they're getting them in other places. So based on that, I did want to talk a little bit about, we've hinted at it, but I wanted to talk about distribution and some of your ideas. I mean, you are, getting your stuff on the newsstands, and you have some other ideas and things like that. So what kind of direction are you going in as far as distribution?
Well, we're definitely doing any kind of distribution that gets us into more stores. I want to do. I'm talking to almost like 24 other stores, some pretty big chains. But the thing is that whenever we expand out, I always want to make sure that, does this help comic shops to thrive? Because it's always the most important thing to me. So when we launch a book, like for instance, I'll take Zero Jumper here.
Yeah.
We already have in the back of every single book, for those that don't know, we already have a directory of comic shops that carry our stuff. So it's listed by state, and then we've got international as well. If we do this, we're doing an initiative where we're going to have a title called ICYMI. So in case you missed it. And it's going to be reprinted all ages and teen stories that have the most broad appeal, because that's what, after a year of being on newsstand, that's what I've seen has the best success rate. The heavier, mature stuff, it tends to do much better at a comic shop than on a newsstand, where it's an impulse purchase. So usually it turns to, I'm going to get this as a gift for my kid, or I'm going to get this as a gift for my grandkid, or a niece or a nephew, or something like that. So it's very unlikely that they're going to purchase a mature rated comic or a very dark story and things like that. So the whole line is going to be composed of these kind of reprints that have been out for a year or so already at the comic shop. It's completely new, though, to an impulse buy newsstand client who doesn't even know what the hell Alterna is. It's just maybe this book looks interesting, so they're going to pick it up. And that line is going to be 99 cents and is going to have on the back, that back cover ad. Now, on the back cover ad of here, we've got a BCW ad. The back cover of those newsstand books, the ICYMI, it's going to be a comic shop locator ad. So it's going to say, find more of these at your local comic shop. Visit this link. And on the inside is going to have ads as well. We have an ad here for a comic shop, but on the ads on that book, it's going to have inside front and back cover ads that have to do with finding more of our comics at a local comic shop. So everything that we do when we have this expanded distribution is going to go back to letting people know there's a local comic shop probably in your neighborhood you're not even aware of. Go find some more of these, and not just ours, but hopefully other people's as well. And it's something that we used to see, that kind of synergy between newsstand and the direct market. For those that don't know, newsstand doesn't really carry back issues. They're not really going to have an extensive amount.
Right.
They're going to carry certain amounts. They have limited space. So that's why we're dwindling down to just, it came out on a Wednesday and the ICYMI title for newsstand. And because of that, we're going to attract more people to comic shops. And they're going to go in there and they're going to go, wow, like there's so much more here I did not know existed before. Because I've done a ton of signings at bookstores like Barnes & Noble. Someone will come up to the table and they'll pick up the book and they'll go, oh, this looks interesting. Open it up. Oh, it's a comic book. They still make comic books? I always get at least 2 to 3 people that do that. And that's because people just don't know. They don't see them anymore. You know, if you're not someone who's actively into comics, you're not going to ever go to a comic shop to go find comics that you don't really care about and know about. You're just going to think, oh, you know, well, comic books, I'm sure that they exist or whatever it is, and that's about it. You're going to go on with your day. But if you see a comic out and about where you are, if we're more proactive with reaching the audience as opposed to waiting for them to get to us, maybe they see something like a Zero Jumper or an XII or a Mr. Crypt, and they go, oh, that looks kind of interesting. I'll take a look. And even if they just open it up and read and they know about it and they take a look at the book, they now know about that character. And the next time they see that issue, they're going to more than likely consider purchasing that. Or maybe they look it up on the internet and then they purchase directly from us, or they purchase at their comic shop. There's so many ways now to do something like that. We got a huge boost in sales just from the fact that we had books on the newsstand because they acted like advertisements for the company.
Right.
So someone would see the books and then you go, I want to look up this publisher and learn a little bit more about them because some of that looked interesting, but I don't really know. And then they'd purchase stuff on our Etsy and they'd leave our, you know, in a note, they would say, oh, saw these on a newsstand at a Books A Million, you know, figure I'd give the rest of them a try too. And, you know, a sale that went from $1.50 at a Books A Million now turns into a $60 sale because they just bought pretty much everything that we make. So it that kind of thing, if it happens for us, and we're just, I mean, who the hell are we really when you think about it? If it happens for us, why wouldn't that happen for other well-known publishers, big name authors and creators with licensed properties and all that other kind of stuff? So I feel like we have such a small mindset in comics where we think, you know, these things got to just stay in their little subset community and, you know, no one in the mainstream is going to like them, which is completely insane. Because we have all these properties and all these films and all these merchandise, you know, everywhere. It's all over the place. Comics are more popular than ever before, but the books themselves are in less places than ever before.
Yeah, I mean, for like Marvel and DC, I keep thinking if there's a way to get comics in like a movie theater, and I don't really know logistically how you do that because there's not really a place where you could purchase them unless it's at like the concession stand, and then it doesn't. I don't know if at the low price or whatever, how that would work because the theater's got to make money. But maybe if it's like, maybe it's a giveaway, an advertisement, a purchase of a popcorn, you get a free comic or something. And the same thing here, find Spider-Man at your local comic book store. I mean, that's where people are. They're going to see these movies. Why aren't there any comics there? There's got to be a way to make that work. I don't know.
Absolutely. You know, even just something as simple as a quick display, like a cardboard display that has some comics that relate to the characters that are in the theater at that point in time. Or like Infinity War, for instance. They had those True Believer Infinity Gauntlet books that are $1. Why the hell aren't those in every Dollar Tree? Why aren't those in front of every movie theater during that run of that film? It's not hard to do it.
Yeah, and they could do it for free. I mean, they spend, you go see these giant cutout poster cardboard things.
Yeah.
Why not throw some comics, even if they're just there for free? I mean, it's
exactly.
It can't be any more than those cardboard cutouts, I would imagine. But
oh no way, yeah, those cardboard cutouts are expensive. Holy smokes! But yeah, so there's so many very obvious ideas. that's the painful part. Is there's none of these ideas that you're like, wow, like I never thought of that. These are all very obvious ideas that like pretty much everyone has, and everyone's wondering why aren't they doing it, and they just don't want to do it.
Or advertise them on the screen in a trailer. I don't know, but
how hard would that be? You know, it's not hard at all. It's just for whatever reason, and I don't know why. It almost seems like they're hell bent on making sure that comics eventually die.
Yeah,
because they're not doing a whole hell of a lot to support it.
Yeah, I mean, I'm the target market. I'm 47 years old. I mean, but you know, I've only got someone. You know, if you want this thing to continue, you got to bring younger people into it. So, you know, I don't know. I mean, it's just, and that's how I discovered comics on the newsstand. Anyone my age discovered it on the newsstand, and then they go to the comic book stores, and there wasn't even an ad. We've had to figure that out. But you do that, plus put the ad that lets you know exactly that you can find them on the at the comic book stores. I mean, yeah, I mean, I think that's great.
Especially, yeah, everybody's got a phone now, so you got instant access to information at all points in time. It makes no sense. You know, if everyone's looking, you know, they say you go to like a Best Buy and you look up like the TV on Amazon to make sure it's, you know, cheaper there. If everyone's doing that immediately, like you're doing your window browsing and price comparison right on your phone in the palm of your hand, you don't even have to have like a flyer, nothing. You could just go boom, instantaneous and compare. You can look up then and see, okay, wow, where are there more comics? Maybe they don't even buy that Alterna comic. Maybe they just see the ad on the back and go, there's a comic shop by me. And maybe all they do is look up on their phone and go, crap, there really is. And then maybe they just go right to that comic shop.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, I love it. I see it happening. So, so we do have a lot of people that watch the show and follow us that are, you know, a lot of people are aspiring creators or creatives, or, you know, comic creators or whatever. So I am kind of curious, and I know Josh has some questions about this too, but sort of the relationship between a creator and you as a publisher, and kind of what maybe you're looking for. I haven't looked at your submission guidelines, so it's probably out there already, but like, what do you, when somebody presents to you, are you looking for a script? Are you looking for the team to be fully formed? Or is that, you know, do they have to have everything? Do they have to have a finished book? How does somebody, what's the best scenario for somebody to present a project to you?
Yeah, I'm always looking for a completed creative team. I'm looking for at least 5 to 8 pages that are completed as well. Sometimes people want to submit a project where it's just really a pitch, and pitches are great. We all have pitches. We all have ideas, but they don't really mean much of anything because the end result could be completely different than what your pitch was. So, you know, if you have a pitch and it's done by someone who's never made a comic before, and, you know, it could be a great sounding pitch, and maybe it just doesn't look good. It's not going to be a pitch that then, you know, oh, well, I'm getting like Greg Capullo to draw it. It's a completely different experience. So I always want to see a completed piece. I want to see lettering, inking, coloring, literally a finished 5 to 8 pages.
Okay, so 5 to 8 pages is fine, because I'm like, do you have to have a full book? Do you have to have the whole run done? I mean,
yeah, no. Yeah, because we can, you know, if we pick it up, we can plan out our schedule. My schedule is usually planned in advance, a year to a year and a half minimum from right now. You know, so we can even just say, okay, well, we'll do this. If it takes you time, we'll say, okay, it takes 2 to 3 years for you to finish, you know, to a certain comfortable point where you can, you know, promote without being completely nervous about, I can't finish these deadlines. If that gives you time, then we go, okay, yeah, 2 years from now, we'll put this book out. Because ideally, I always want 2 to 3 issues done before we even put issue 1 out.
Yeah, That makes a lot of sense, because I would be nervous about just
Yeah.
based on a pitch too, because I've seen so many people that have great ideas that just they just don't happen, and or they can't put a team together or whatever. So that does make a lot of sense.
Yeah. So, and then in terms of everything else, creators get 100% of their IP. They keep all that. So, you're not going to be splitting hairs on contracts later down for, merchandise or toys. Let's say, you publish the next like Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles and it's at Alterna. Well, you keep 100% of everything related to that other than what's, published by us. So if you get a movie deal, if you get toys, if you get, you want to make t-shirts, you want to sell posters, you want to, whatever, you keep all of that. We don't get a cent from it. And then it's an 80-20 split on the books. So you get 80% of the profits on those books. We just recuperate whatever we spent on the print run and, little things like shipping to the distribution and, just stuff that's literally like pennies per book. And you get 80% of what you make with the graphic novel, the digital, the single issues, all of that. And then we encourage and help creators that do Kickstarters or any kind of crowdfunding. So you don't even have to worry about, well, are they going to really be okay with me doing a Kickstarter or something? Are they going to, because some publishers aren't. Some publishers don't want you to do that at all. And they won't support it. They won't even pick the book up. If they hear about it, on a Kickstarter or something, they're not even going to touch it. Whereas we actively support and encourage anyone that does a Kickstarter or an Indiegogo at Alterna. We've had a 0% failure rate for all those books. We've had I think 20 something books that have done Kickstarters and they've all hit their goals. So we utilize as much as we can because why not? It just seems really counterintuitive, to have all these wonderful options at your disposal, because some people are going to want to support in certain ways. Why close yourself off from doing that?
Yeah, and so the only thing that I guess, and this is not really your, I mean, as the publisher, this isn't really anything that you have any say in, but for instance, so it's a creator-owned book. So if the writer writes it, he's got to hire an artist and everything, and that I'm assuming that's all. It's what's the term for it? They're playing a flat rate. They're not getting it. So, I mean, and obviously the artist put a lot of time and everything in it. So, and that's probably no different than like how Image does it.
Yeah, it's a lot like Image in a way, only we don't have like that flat fee and things like that. It in terms of page rates, we don't pay page rates. I know some people are wondering, well, why don't you pay page rates? The biggest reason, and I don't know why other publishers don't, but the biggest reason that I don't is because as soon as we start paying for page rates, let's say we're going to pay a creative team, I'm going to want some editorial on that. I'm going to want to make sure that we're getting what we're paying for. Whereas if it's your creative vision and you're doing the paying and you're the one that's overseeing the whole thing and it's your IP and you're keeping 100% and all that kind of stuff, it's the risk reward factor. That's why you get the 80% on the profit. That's why you get 100% if the thing takes off, all that kind of stuff. If we start doing page rates and payouts, it turns into, well, now we need like 50% of the IP. Now we got to come up with how do we recoup our expenses in case of this, and this. It becomes more of a play for, well, how do we make sure we can still do business and still pay people out and basically not get screwed and make sure that we're not bankrupt in a year because we wanted to pay creative teams out and we had no game plan. So that's why we encourage Kickstarters as well. So this way you can have, a couple $1,000s raised and you can pay your creative team and not be completely in the hole on a book.
Yeah, I mean, I wasn't expecting you to pay page rates. I'm just thinking like if there was some, and this is a whole different thing, but if there was some way where, the artist wasn't necessary, if there's a writer and the artist wasn't necessarily just work for hire type thing, that they had some, but that's kind of up to the creative team to make those sort of arrangements. And I mean, and the creator is taking a risk because he's the one he or she is having to hire the illustrators and everything like that. But yeah, I mean, but then, I mean, for me as somebody who writes and draws, or like say, so for a title like Zero Jumper, that's a great scenario because I think it's the same writer and artist. Whereas
Yeah, he does everything. Yeah.
one of the other titles may, the artist might be work for hire. Usually the artist is usually doing a lot more work than the writer. But anyway, that's a whole different thing. But I know Josh, you had a question about the kind of that arrangement too, didn't you?
Yeah, it was just a curiosity thing. So you guys cover the print runs then, like the cost of the print runs for
the single issues we do. Yeah. For the graphic novels, I always encourage Kickstarter and stuff like that because we can't sell any advertising within those things. So because of that, it becomes a much harder thing to get that money back. If I had to just go, well, we'll cover the graphic novel run, then that single issue run better have been phenomenal, as opposed to, well, if it does all right and the creator really wants it out there as a graphic novel, okay, well, we'll help you out with a Kickstarter and we'll do all of that. And then, you raise the funds that way. And it's all these Kickstarters for graphic novels. I think every single one of them has hit their goal within 7 days. So it's that crazy.
Okay. So the graphic novels are funded by the creators. So when it comes to like the sales of it, like you're kind of assisting with the distribution. Is the percentage the same? Like that's
the percentage is still the same, but the creator gets their reimbursement for their print run. So let's say it costs like $3 a book. It's usually like $2, but let's say it costs like $3 a book and it's a $10 book, and after distribution takes their cut, we're talking about like $4.50 or so on a book. So they get $3 per book sold because that's how much the print cost was, and then they split that $150 that's left 80-20, so they get 80% of that. So they still recoup their print cost as the units sell. I know some publishers do almost like they're first out, so like they have to recoup all their expenses first, and then someone will start to get payments. We don't do that. We do it right off the bat. You start to make money when these things sell. And we it's a quarterly payout system and things like that. But it's nothing like, okay, we've got this magical pie in the sky number where it's like, $3,000 or something. And we have all these expenses and hidden fees and whatever else and advertising and this and that. And then we have to make that first. And then you can start making your money. No, we don't do that. And I know that there's publishers that do that. And it's to the detriment of some creative teams. I know that there's a whole bunch of creators that are out there that still haven't seen a dime from their graphic novel sales or their single issue sales because the publisher allegedly never made their expenses back.
Yeah,
and
that's pretty common in publishing.
Yeah. So all of our guys always get paid as per units that sell. Every quarter they get something.
Yeah. So with the so what's interesting, you guys ran for a long time as a graphic novel publisher, right?
Yep.
Like initially. So what, like, do you see a difference in the two markets? Because it does seem like what we were saying at the beginning, it does seem like graphic novels are kind of, from what I've observed, and just as a buyer myself, like I tend to prefer trades. I think that what you're presenting as a company is so brilliant because it makes me want to buy floppies, because it's like for $150, like you said, that's much. That's an easier buy-in than like $5, where I'm like, well, $5. Well, if I save 4 issues worth of money, I can just buy the trade when it comes out, which is terrible being a creator myself. Like I should be buying the single issues, encouraging the creators to keep going. But the point being, like, that's a much better entry point. But what I was saying with like the graphic novels is, like, at least what I've noticed is that it does seem like that is kind of the game now, where it seems like a lot of publishers are probably making the bulk of their money on graphic novels, but I don't know the industry that well, so I don't know.
That's a really great question. I think we're in a really unique vantage point when it comes to this. So when we started doing what we've been doing, we started with print on demand. We started with $1.88 an issue. I'm no distribution, selling issues then at $3 a piece. And then after a year or two of doing that, we got picked up for distribution by Diamond. And I'm looking around and I'm like, there's no way these guys can do single issue production and maintain a consistent schedule. So I just thought it's easier on the creators. People will go, oh, it's a graphic novel. I'm used to waiting like a year or 6 months or whatever for a graphic novel. That's not so bad. So we just basically did that more or less out of just necessity. So we
Yeah.
started just doing graphic novels, and they were like $10 a piece or so. It was pretty much all black and white stuff, so it would be a little cheaper to produce. And basically what occurred was that everyone thought we were crazy. Everyone thought we were going to go out of business within a year or so because, what the hell are you doing? Graphic novels only. You need single issues to get an audience and all this other stuff. And it's kind of funny to see the industry flip-flop now and to see us kind of almost reverse because of it. So as things went on, everyone started catching on to graphic novels like crazy, and the market's become flooded to the point that we'll see it, right? We see all these publishers planning out issue arcs because they're planning for the trade, because that's where the money is. So they don't even care if the single issues don't do anything, because the big publishers know, well, our money's going to come from the trade. Now, because of that, every stinking book has a trade. There's so many trades out there. So now you're talking about the entry point, being $3, $4, $5 an issue. Well, now it just went to like $15 to $20 a trade. And it's become, this is something that's pricing out large amounts of potential readers and current readers.
Yeah.
So as we have been doing the graphic novels, we noticed that sales were strongest from Amazon and from libraries. Everywhere else has been sort of as much as I hate to say it, Barnes and Noble has been difficult. So it's the kind of thing where I'm not entirely sure if we're going to have a Barnes and Noble within 5 years, because things have been tail spinning for that company. I used to be a Barnes and Noble shareholder when it was like at 12 or something. And this was like years ago, when like Amazon, at the same time I owned stock in Amazon, it was like 75. And I sold it, made like $1,000 or something when it went up a couple points. And I thought like, oh man, that's awesome. I wish I held on to that stock, because holy crap, did that go through the roof. And now you look at Barnes and Noble and it's at like 5 or something. And they keep tanking every year. Every quarter it gets worse and worse. They're on their 5th CEO in 5 years. They're doing weird things to the business in terms of strategy and things like that. So it's an odd market. But libraries and Amazon have been doing great. Libraries in particular, it's an untapped market for a lot of graphic novels. So that space is slowly starting to get acclimated to the whole industry. But because of the fact that everyone is shifting so hard, because if you ever notice in comics, it seems like the shifts are like, they pivot on a 90 degree. They don't just like ease into it. Yeah. All of a sudden, it's like everything is, when Watchmen and Dark Knight Returns came out, all of a sudden it turns into like, well, can't do all ages books anymore. Gotta make them gritty and grim. Yeah. And they just shift so hard. And then it's like, whoa. You just like sacrificed all your readership because, something did really well. Keep doing the thing that did really well, but also, kind of hold on to the thing that you've been doing, because that's what's going to continue to grow your audience. And then they grow up and they read the grimmer, grittier stuff. Sure. And we're noticing that again, they're doing like a hard shift towards young adult and towards all ages. Instead of kind of just, we can have these things, that's fine, but have them along with the other stuff that people are enjoying. There's no need for that hard, just completely give up on the stuff people are enjoying and then just transition, boom, right into the next thing. Yeah. And sales wise, they're doing the same thing. They're going, oh, graphic novels are doing really well. Graphic novels are taking off. Boom, hard shift right into the graphic novels. Who cares about the issues? To the point that they could be through the roof. I don't even care if someone purchases an issue anymore. If anything, let's make the issues as high as possible, because these people, if they purchase them, we're going to make tons of money off of the single issue. And it doesn't really matter if they don't sell anyway, because it's going to just force people to become a graphic novel or a trade reader, which is really what we want. Yeah. And that's what these companies are doing. But the thing is now what happens? Let's say the floppy dies, the single issue dies out. Once that occurs, your entry point for a story, even if you get the whole stupid story, it's going to be $15 to $20 a piece. Yeah. So we're looking at, complaining about $5 an issue. What happens when there is no $5 an issue? Because there is no issue. It's a $15, $20 graphic novel. Yeah. You're going to notice, we think readership now is struggling. We're going to notice everything completely tanking at that point. Because also then for retailers, especially comic shops that don't have that returnability that the book trade has, they're going to tank, because if those graphic novels don't completely sell out, they're going to be screwed. They're taking on way more risk right off the bat, and you're not going to be able to sell as many. If you notice, the average highest selling graphic novel is usually like a fraction of the highest selling single issue.
For sure.
We're talking about maybe 10% of what the single issue sale is. So if we're going to talk about those numbers, it's going to become comic shops are going to it's just going to be the highest selling ones, which is usually about 400 to 500 shops are keeping the entire industry afloat. The industry in comics really follows the 80-20 rule, where 80% of the product is purchased by 20% of the stores. So you're talking about 400 to 500 shops. Now, as soon as we start getting closer to like 1,000 shops, we're going to notice some very, very hard changes that start occurring. And I think at that point in time, the bigger publishers are going to really push hard on the graphic novel market, which is going to further accelerate the decline of comic shops, because you're not going to have that entry point anymore that's affordable. As it is, it's becoming insane already. The most affordable book would be, in the dollar bin, or something like a True Believers or a DC Essentials or a $1 kind of book. But that's all reprinted material. So what happens to the new stuff? You want people to read the new stuff. Well, how can they do that when they're looking at that going, man, $15-20 to try something new? I didn't really want to spend $5.
Yeah, like something you just said really resonated. I mean, a lot of what you said resonated with me, but one of the things, this is something I noticed just as a cartoonist. Like, I moved to Portland, like 80% of indie cartoonists who were like, woohoo, during the boom when, like autobio comics and kind of more serious graphic novels were like starting to plateau a bit. And it's like early 2000s. And I noticed, like, I would meet like indie guys who would just talk crap about like Batman, and they'd talk crap about like mainstream comics. But they'd be like stuck in this kind of like indie fantagraphics world and like kind of just deny that whole genre of comics as even being relevant. And then on the other hand, I would feel kind of alienated with those people, because even though I'm doing indie stuff that's kind of darker and heavier and for adult readers, like I'm definitely the convention table that if a kid picked up my comic, I'd be like, no, you don't want to buy that, but the point being, like, I'd noticed like this alienation between both crowds, where like I'd have people who would like at conventions like look at stuff that was indie and be like, oh, I only buy like capes and tights, and indie guys be like, I don't buy capes and tights. Now, like, to me, I just don't understand what it is about comics, and this is where what you're saying resonates with me, that makes people separate it from all entertainment. Meaning, like, you go, like, just pull up Netflix right now, and you have 1 million genres of movies. And rarely are you going to have somebody who's like, I'm a horror movie buff, but I hate, like, all of this genre of movie, and it shouldn't exist, Like, and to me, I've always found that weird. Or, like, you go to the bookstore, and there's, like, the fiction section and the nonfiction section, and there's historical fiction, and there's, like, a breadth of, like, just this wide swath of what's available. Kids books, same thing. You have kids books that are like, educational, and kids books that are all over the place. And for some reason, comics, there's like this dividing line that's drawn between like genres. And I think, like you were saying, like floppies and graphic novels, like, can't they kind of both exist? Like I feel like, like for like Chris Ware to do floppies would be kind of weird. Because like Chris Ware books are great as like these big, thick books, but like for like a serialized comic that's like a thrill ride, like you want that in single issues. It's ideal in single issues. The page turn is going to be better. The pacing is going to be intense. So like I'm so excited. Like that's part of why I'm really excited to see like you guys doing newsprint again, and even like the focus you have on the genres you have. Even though like they aren't my genres as a creator, because I'm definitely not making much escapist stuff. I guess it's kind of an escape because it's reading, but it's it's more heavy stuff. I'm trying to do art, which is hard with commerce, but the point being, I still want to see that stuff out there, and I still want that entry point for people, because I didn't start out with this. Like it was like an easy. An easing into,
Exactly.
It's like you get into your superhero stuff, and then you pick up like, like you notice this little offshoot by DC, Vertigo, and then like maybe that shoots into like, what's this weird phone book looking thing, and you pick up like Cerebrus, like there's no entry point if you cut like that pipeline of kids and accessibility and like and the low entry point, the low cost entry point. So I think it's really cool that you guys are doing that, and I agree. It's like the rising tide kind of raises all ships, and it's one of those things where like I'm not a Marvel or DC guy, but yeah, if Marvel or DC stops, I mean, like if you guys look at the sales numbers that existed for like Bone and Cerebrus when those were coming out, I mean, those things would tank like the majority of sale, like destroy most of the sales numbers of the mainstream, like the big two right now.
Yeah.
And that was like an indie, and that was bad sales numbers at the time. So it's like, when the sales were ridiculous in comics, like the indies had really decent sales. And like, so it kind of all rises up. So yeah, I'm excited by it because I'm thinking it'll make more accessibility. I feel like we've made some headway into bookstores and into libraries. Like that's a weird thing. Like growing up, I never saw that. And I do see that as progress. Like, I mean, Gene Yang just got the MacArthur Genius Grant this year, so that's a cartoonist getting the MacArthur Genius Grant. Huge step for comics. But yeah, like what's going on with the stuff that, like, while that's all good steps, like why are we taking steps back on the progress we already had carved out? You're right. Like that doesn't make sense,
Yeah, it feels as if the conversation, like if you talk to somebody who doesn't read comics, or you just like when I'm at shows, I'll ask, what kind of comics do you like? And they'll usually say something along the lines of what kind of superheroes they like.
Yeah.
And the conversation usually isn't, oh, I like horror, I like sci-fi, the way you would talk about movies. Like if I ask you, what kind of movies do you like? You'd start giving me genres, you start giving me kind of different sort of titles that were different genres all over the place. But comics, it usually is that conversation, especially for people that aren't really super aware of the industry or the variety that's out there. They'll either say, I like superheroes, or I don't. And that conversation within the industry is kind of an important one that needs to be had. And it seems as if, and obviously because the biggest companies that control the most market share, they're producing superheroes, and they have absolutely no desire to branch out into other things for the most part. It's always going to be stuck at that of that superhero thing. So it's up to us as indies to kind of all unite on some level, at least. That's what drives me crazy to see a lot of the online turmoil and things like that, because there's so many problems right now in the industry. We're all upset about so many things. We're not eventually going to have an industry to be upset about if we keep it up. So all this stuff that turns into, mudslinging back and forth and all of that between creators to readers and creators to creators and all that other stuff. Talk about, the books that you're working on. Talk about the creators that you're proud to support. Talk about the comic shops that support your work and put your things on the shelf so you can actually put food on your table and a roof over your head. Like all these kind of things, they're getting lost in the mix. And these are actual, real, substantial problems that can easily be fixed by just discussing things in a positive way. It seems like we're focused so much on the things that, we want to drive certain people out of readership or the industry or whatever it may be. We're losing focus that everybody that sees this from the outside is going, wow, like, I don't know if I want to start reading comics. It seems really frightening and intimidating. And it used to be frightening and intimidating because the stories were very, intense. And now it turns into frightening and intimidating because they're like, I don't want to be associated with comic readership if this is what comic readership is like. And this is what creators are kind of doing, mutating the landscape a bit with the conversation. Instead of talk about how amazing comic books are and why people should read them. Stop talking about so much about how many people shouldn't read them. Let's get new people excited about this stuff so we can continue to make them for forever.
Yeah, I mean, there's enough different genres in comics again, a lot of people don't realize that, but there's enough room for everyone to play in the space to enjoy comics. So yeah, I don't know. But there was a question in the chat, or a statement in the chat. Alpha Proto says comics used to be disposable entertainment. When people started thinking of comics as collectibles, the prices slowly went up. And that's a weird thing. Yeah, because like I used to just read through, and like when I was first learning how to draw, I would trace over them. So a lot of my old comics have the indentation of my pencil over them and everything, and all that stuff, and like roll them up in your back pocket, all that stuff. Like when I went to pick up my comics, and I'm looking through my Alterna titles, and there was no Exilium, which had just came out, and I asked my comic book store owner, I said, I think this is everything except for one title. And I said, did you not get Exilium? And he says, well, yeah, Diamond, it was damaged from Diamond. And I said, well, do you like send them back? I don't know how that all works, but no, he says, no, they're back here. And he brings it out, and there's a little crease on the side. I'm like, sell it. I'll buy it. I want it. I'm going to read it. It doesn't have to be perfect for me. So yeah, that's kind of a weird thing, you know?
Yeah. As soon as they started becoming collector's items, the price definitely started going up because it became a premium product. It didn't become an accessible mainstream product anymore. I mean, what I find is really funny is the fact that how Jim Lee got his start on Alpha Flight, because Alpha Flight was a low selling title, and it was something that, well, whatever. We'll put
That's
this
what got me into comics. Actually, was Alpha Flight. That's the first comic book I ever started collecting was Alpha Flight, because it was that one issue where, spoiler alert, they killed off the main character. It was the one before that, and then like he's the main guy, and the next issue he's dead. I'm like, whoa! And that's what got me into comics right there. Sorry to interrupt.
Yeah. No, yeah, absolutely. and the thing that's so funny is that I was looking up sales for, how low was a low title that they gave, this up and comer a shot, and it was something like 300,000 units. That was a low selling title because everything else was selling like 700 to 800,000 units. 300,000 units now is like the number one with a bullet. So the fact that, an Alpha Flight at one point in time was moving more than 250,000 comics. Man, what happened? It just seems like something went askew. And the biggest thing I can think of is the fact that, again, comics used to be in so many places. You couldn't go to a store without seeing comic books. Now it's like, oh man, it's a journey. It's a journey to find comics. And even if you see like an Archie or the Marvel Digests, Marvel teamed up with Archie too to put their stuff out like that, it's just not the same thing. It's just not. And they used to have such a presence, and it used to be something exciting and fun. And as a kid, you could go to the store and see comic books, and even if you didn't buy them, you could at least read them and take a look. And then when you became an adult and you had money to spend, or a teenager and you had money to spend, you would get some comics. It's just I know there's a lot of things going on in terms of you can spend money on video games or whatever else and this and that, and that's often the excuse of, well, games came along and then they killed out comics. And then especially because this is the argument that drives me crazy. The people will say, well, games make more money per square footage, so that's why they drove comics out of those spaces. And I'm like, I don't know how many grocery stores you go to where you see video games being sold.
Right. Yeah. Great point. Yeah, I would like nothing more to see spinner racks again, really, honestly. But I think with what you're doing, I really think if you continue to, it seems like things are happening, and if it continues this way, and I think it might take like one of your creators like getting noticed and bringing more. I don't know what it's going to take, but something's going to happen. Something with one of these titles is going to catch on in the same way that a Marvel or DC titles caught on, and I think once people really start to take notice, I just hope that people start following suit and doing the kind of things that you're doing, and I really do think it can change the industry.
Yeah, I hope other indies really, take up arms with that and realize that they're the ones that are going to be the driving force to make some change. It's not going to come from the top. I think there's too many people that are following the leader right now. It's like a bunch of lemmings going off the cliff. We're looking at the big two and try to emulate. Well, what does the big two put out? What do they push? How do they market and all that other stuff? If anything, right now is a great time to look at what they do in particular Marvel as well, because DC's doing some right things. DC's doing some pretty good things, and they're trying. But look at what Marvel does and do the opposite. It's like, have that George Costanza thing where, anything that you think is the right thing to do the opposite of that. Because what Marvel's doing is taking comics in a direction that's not sustainable. They don't care. They literally could shut down that publishing division tomorrow and still be making billions upon billions of dollars because of the movies, the merchandise, all the other stuff that they do. The comics are they probably view them as a loss leader, but they're not necessarily leading anyone anywhere other than, if you like the movies are like the pinnacle of, most medium in terms of how people view it. The mainstream audience is how they view it, is that, once it gets turned into a movie, oh man, a movie was made of it. Okay. It becomes legitimate all of a sudden, it becomes validated. So you see all these comics that get turned into films, and you're thinking, well, why should I read the comic? They turned them into movies. They turned them into TV shows. So you need to get a different audience involved. You need to seek that audience out. We talk about in the industry a lot about diversity and all this other stuff. If you want to see more diversity within your reading, within your comic collection, start diversifying your tastes. Don't just, depend on superhero books to bring all your diversity. Indie has been diverse for decades, for forever. But even within that, superheroes have been diverse for a very long time. So we're talking about, if we want to have all these kinds of diverse stories and diverse characters, what are we doing to reach those audiences? Because if we're not doing anything different, why are we expecting an audience to just find a book that they didn't know really that it even existed? So there could be an audience out there that wants to see more, gay representation in books and all this other kind of stuff. But we have to find this audience. We have to make sure this audience knows about these books. We can't just say, well, we put it out, I don't know why it didn't sell. It didn't sell because you guys didn't market it. So maybe market it, push it, maybe put it into places where, do some marketing research and demographics and all this simple business, normal kind of stuff and get your product in front of people that would be interested in it. It's like any other business, but comics is a very weird business. It's we put it on the comic shop shelf, and it's up to the reader to want to find and read that book. So they're depending on a reader to change their taste or expand their taste immediately as soon as they see a book. They don't want to do the work of trying to find the reader that this book might speak to. They want the reader to instead change for them. And that's kind of what we're noticing in the industry, where that's not going to happen. There's no industry where that's going to happen, where you expect your customer to make drastic changes in the products that they consume just based on a whim.
Right. Yeah, so we're inching up on an hour and a half. But there are a couple of things in the chat. Charles Tofield wants to know, can you buy Alterna trades? I think I can answer that for you, Peter. Yes, right?
Yep.
Yeah. I don't know if you can get those that easily in comic book stores, but you also have Etsy store. And when we wrap up, you can let everyone know all the different ways that you can purchase stuff. The other thing, he also wanted to know, what exactly are they, meaning I'm assuming Marvel or DC, doing to hurt the industry? I don't know if we can go into that right now. That's probably a whole other show. So, but anyway, so I don't know, Josh, is there anything else that you wanted to ask Peter before we wrap things up?
No, I mean, I think I'd agree. I think it's always good to have more diversity and stuff in comics, but it's also good to diversify your marketing. And
absolutely.
The idea of thinking outside of the box and approaching audiences you may not have approached before, trying different venues. And then I also want to just kind of reinforce the idea that I'm constantly this is a weird thing, because I've been kind of in the indie scene, and obviously Alterna's been in the indie scene for a long time. When I hear people getting all up in arms about Marvel and DC, I'm like, join the club. There's been so many disenfranchised readers, and not for the reasons that might be going on right now, but there've been a lot of people who some people just got bored of the capes and tights thing,
Yep.
and have moved on and kind of found other avenues. But the point is, if you're a creator and you're kind of sick of what you're seeing, like make new stuff and get it out there and try different avenues. Do what Alterna is doing, where you're like, you're like, you miss newsprint, put newsprint back. Like you miss, the spinner racks, let's get them back. Like there's no, like none of us are beholden to like two companies to make everything we wish for happen. Like we can actually, I think we can actually make it happen. So that, to me, it's exciting to hear anybody like putting out indies, putting out like trying different things, trying different approaches, because it's true. It's like we got to expand readership, and I agree with that. So yeah, that was it.
Anything other than, we'll give you a chance to promote it, anything, Peter, but anything else that you wanted to add on before we kind of wrap it up?
I mean, I absolutely agree with what Josh was saying about we need to expand that readership. I think everybody that's familiar with me or Alterna, that's the whole point of what we're doing. That's why we make comics for everyone, and now I want comics to be everywhere. So that's the biggest push with Alterna Ween.
Awesome. All right, so this is Artcasters. So I'm gonna kick it over to Josh. Josh, where can everyone find your stuff or anything that you want to tell people about?
So you can find my comics at quarterlystories.com, and you can also find me on the YouTubes by looking for Joshua Kimball with a K, and then every other week you can also find me on Scott's channel, which if you haven't subscribed to Scott's channel yet, you're on it, so hit the subscribe and the bell. All right.
And okay, Peter, so there's Alterna Ween. You want to talk about that? Anything else you want to promote? Tell people different ways that they can get Alterna, or anything else that you want to talk about, where to find you online, social media, any of that stuff.
Sure. So I'll mention Alterna Ween right now and just cover that. Alternaween.com will take you straight to the Indiegogo campaign that's going on right now. Basically, the whole campaign centers around using our comics as trick-or-treats. The funding is going to be used towards helping us expand distribution so we can get into a whole variety of stores, because this stuff kind of costs more money than you'd realize to do that kind of expansion, both in terms of creating the product and in terms of paying for certain placements of product. Other than that, right now, the best place that you can order our books direct would be orderalterna.com. But I always encourage people to go to the comic shop first. So that's why you can go to alternacomics.com/retailers and find a list of newsstands, bookstores, and comic shops that carry our products. They might not carry everything. Some of the stuff sells out, but they do carry our books, so you can go and talk to them about getting a pull list going and something like that, because it's so important to especially to support the local comic shops that are the lifeblood of this industry. I know everybody says that a lot, and it's an overused phrase, but it's true. So absolutely, first and foremost, support your local comic shop before any other avenue like an eBay or an Etsy or an Amazon. Yeah,
and I kind of did that. I think originally when I first discovered you guys, I went out to basically all my local comic stores, picked up whatever I could find. And it's really hard. It's with the way Diamond is, it's hard to find anything. So, I picked up everything I could find from my local comic book store. Then a new shop opened really close to me. So I went in there, got a pull list. It took a while for all that stuff to kind of come through. But I just filled in the gaps at Alterna's Etsy store. But after that, now I'm in a position, I think, where anything from Alterna will come to my local comic store, go in the pull box, and so I will support them. So definitely support your local comic book store. And if you can't get it there, then go check out these other avenues and everything. So yeah, so that's super awesome. So Peter, thank you again for coming on. I know you had to stay up late to do this and everything, so I really appreciate it.
Yeah, I'm jacked up on coffee, so it's all right.
All right, and I want to thank everyone in the chat and everything. I'm sorry we didn't get to all the questions and everything, but I do appreciate you guys. And if there's any other questions, just leave them in the comments and everything. And just before we wrap up, I want to let you guys know kind of how this whole thing works with the Artcasters. So it's a show. It's a weekly show. It kind of bounces back between Josh's channel and my channel. So if you just go to my channel, you're going to see all the even numbered shows. That might not be the case going way back, because sometimes there's scheduling conflicts. But anyway, so if you're noticing you're missing shows, There are playlists on, I don't know if Josh has a playlist, but on my channel, there is a playlist where you can find all the episodes. But because it does switch back and forth, sometimes it gets confusing. And the way YouTube works, they don't always send out notification, even if you hit the bell, even if you subscribe, all that. And because it is sort of a random schedule, different times, different days and everything, the best way to know when we're going to be on is by joining our mailing list, and we don't spam you or anything like that. Usually a half hour before we go live, we send out a newsletter and let you guys know with the link where you can find us and everything. So there is a link in the description to that newsletter. So sign up, and you will never be without the information you need to know when we're going to go on. So again, thanks to everyone. Thanks to Peter. And we will see you guys later next week on Josh's channel, and we will have a different guest. So thanks again, everyone. That is all.